Hi there, I'm Steve Gustafson from ZipAway TV. Today we're going to be talking about utility ropes, belay safety ropes, climbing ropes, and then specifically we're going to talk about what to do with the tail of a rope. Let me back up and do a little bit of brief talk about the anatomy of a rope. Not a lot of detail, just kind of really quick and to the point. First, it's a two-part construction, okay? It's going to have a core. Usually the core, it's like braided strands. Sometimes it's straight strands, look like hair pigtails. And each strand is made up of little filaments. And just like a wire rope or a cable on a zip line, it's filaments to strand, strands make the rope, and then the sheath over the core protects it and guards it from abrasion, dirt, and abusive edges like ropes and climbing wall edges of wood and so forth. Whether you get a dynamic rope such as this one, semi-dynamic rope like this New England KM3, or a true static rope with 1 to 0% stretch, they're going to be two-part construction kern mantle. There are a lot of ropes on the market, but just in general, rule of thumb, we're talking about kern mantle ropes today. All right, moving on. One of the things that we do in the industry is we want to heat seal or somehow seal the end of your rope because it's going to fray and get loose and get kind of boogered out and not look so pretty. And since it's nylon, it has a low enough melting point that we can actually take a cigarette lighter and torch the end and melt it, or we can take a propane torch and use a putty knife, a metal putty scraper, and heat it up and then heat sink through it. You can do electric rope cutter where you plug it in the wall, hit a button, and then there's a little arc filament, you pull it down over and you melt. So you don't cut a rope, you melt the rope. And that's how you get a nice clean edge. Now, there's other ways to do an edge. And a lot of folks will cut it and then they'll just take a cigarette lighter and heat the end. But the problem is it wants to peel back and still expose the core a bit. Other times we'll take some duct tape and we'll whip it and then we'll heat seal it, hoping that that duct tape bonds with the end and keeps it from pulling out, and still it kind of wants to slip and expose the core. I'm not so worried about that because it's on a fixed stopper knot here on a sling. It's not really going to go anywhere, but still you want to have a nice clean end. Now, the other way to do it is just take a piece of cutters, like old cable cutters will do, or some kind of sharp shear, and just shear it, and then you have like a fuzzy end. But then you got to take, like I said, that cigarette lighter and light it and kind of melt it and singe the end, and kind of try to melt the fibers of the sheath to bond in with the core to kind of get a good bonded end. Well, that sometimes doesn't look so pretty either. The way I found the best to do it, works for me, you might have other tricks up your sleeve, is I take the rope and I will actually take a really hot putty knife, a putty scraper, and before I do that, I'll take electrical tape and I'll whip it with electrical tape to kind of get my mark. And then I'll take that really hot putty knife, and then I'll heat it up, get it red cherry hot, and I'll singe it nice and through. I'll kind of move it nice and slow as it melts through and gets a clean end. Then when it's done, I'll take the tape off. I won't leave it on, I'll take it off, and I'll heat the knife up again, and when it's hot, I'll take it and I'll flat it on the end. Just kind of tap it here and get a nice flat end at this point. And then I'll take it nice hot again, and I'll take it and I'll kind of just singe and slide it across the edges. And I'll go back a good, ½ inch to an inch. That's going to make it kind of nice and crusty, which is good. So I come on back, I'll keep taking that putty knife and I'll kind of heat it up and kind of clean it. And then that really gets it to bond to the core as well. And it really helps nice when you pull on that knot, when you tie it, you pull the tail, it doesn't want to come apart. It doesn't want to fray. So that's kind of my secret of how I like to do it. Now, another thing is people want to know about how do you mark your ropes. Like, here's a piece of rope here's a rope, how old is it, what batch was it? Well, either you can color coordinate. For example, if you use a lot of the semi-static rope or semi-dynamic rope, however you want to say it, from KM3 New England, it comes in lime green, comes in orange, comes in red, black, white. You can buy a color specific for a year. So if your whole course is going to use the same kind of rope, buy all lime green this year. And then the next year, and you had to buy a new spool, buy all red. You know the green then's only a year and a half old, and the red's brand new. And then buy a black, and then buy an orange. You can color coordinate by year. Just be sure to take a little 3x5 note card and write that down. Put it in your notes. Tape it to the wall of your equipment shed. Some way to document how old the gear is. You can also track it by who you bought it from and an invoice. You can say, I got this from so-and-so company X on this date. Color code is green rope from New England, and it was cut by so-and-so. Now, the manufacturers will tell you this rope is good on the shelf for 10 years. But once you use the rope, it's going to have an in-service life of 5 years or less, or until it fails a tactile inspection. So when you inspect that rope, and I won't go into a lot of detail here because I did it in a previous video, I'm going to make sure the sheath is all intact, I can't see the core. As long as I don't see any defects that are going to prompt me to want to retire the rope, I'm good to use it for this year. And as long as the use years and the shelf life combined don't exceed 10 years. So you can have a shelf life of 8 years, take it off the shelf, cut a rope, you can use it for 2 years, 8 plus 2, retire it. You can have it on the shelf for 2 years, take it off the shelf, cut it, use it for 5, and then retire it. That's the rule of thumb. Different manufacturers might deviate from that slightly, but check with the manufacturer to be specific. Another topic is, if I don't want to cut the rope and I don't want to put tape on the rope, what other ways can I use to singe the rope to protect it from fraying? You can also get there's plastic sheaths you can get. You slide in a rope, you use a cigarette lighter or a hot air gun. You can heat it up and it kind of shrinky-dink and shrink wraps around the end, and that kind of protects it. I think you can get clear, and if you can even write on a piece of paper little notes about the rope, the year it was made, or the year you put it in service in one element. Slip that piece of paper underneath the heat shrink it, bam, holds the end, and you can also then read on there what it was for. A little bit of an idea. They also have liquid dip rope. You take the end of your rope and you dip it in a container, and then it kind of coats it with a rubberized paint, and let it dry, and it kind of seals the end of the rope that way. That's good if you have all the same ropes, but sometimes you might have ropes cut to different lengths, and you might have 2 ropes cut for one length that your dangle do. You might have another belay rope cut at a separate length for your multivine. You might have another length of rope that's cut twice as long that go up and down a tree for a double rope rappel. And all of a sudden, if they're all the same color, how do you know what rope goes per element? Well, you want to mark your ropes. You want to be careful about this because any kind of ink or dye you introduce to the rope could cause degradation. Now, if you think about when you tie a knot, a figure 8, a bowline on a bite, go ahead and you do stopper knots on a sling, you're going to have 2 to 4 inches of tail. Well, if you're not going to use that tail anyways, if you're going to use a Sharpie marker, you could go ahead and make a Sharpie on the tail end, but not the working end where you're going to be lifelining support. Because if the ink gets in there, it could degrade the rope strength. So you can use Sharpie markers. Now be cautious because some programs use an all black color, which means retired, don't use. Others use the red is dead comment. And if the rope has red tape on it, it's retired from safety use, but it might still be used for utility ropes or a brake block or some other kind of haul rope for the course. But if you want to use tape to color code, again, you can use a core color. Now if red dead is your color for retirement, Let's say you want to use black for your 2020. Or maybe you want to use blue or yellow or purple or pink. You can have a primary first color that shows the year that rope was bought. Then you can have a secondary color, another band of electrical tape, and that would indicate by element. Then if you wanted to go further and you have lots of elements, you could go blue, and a tertiary or a third color would be a two-prong approach for another element. So let's say you could find 7 colors of electrical tape. Well, if you have 7 colors and you're going to go 2 bands, 7 times 7, you have 49 color code options. You could have 49 different ropes on your course, every one with a unique color code. Just put it on a chart, and then you know which peg or dowel rod or location it goes in your storage equipment every single day. You can use the same approach to your carabiners. You can color code your carabiners to match the equipment for that specific element. So if I had an ATC I was going to use on one element and another ATC and another element, and they were getting some different wear characteristics because one was being used harder than the other, and I can rotate it, I'd rotate up the color code of the tape as well per element to match the rope. So you can use Sharpies, you can use all one color rope and just use them and buy new rope every season or every 2 years. But when you start cutting rope to be more specific by element, you need some kind of way to differentiate which rope's long enough to go with that element. Because you'd hate to go out and set up the course, grab the rope for the dangle-do, and it's too short for the multi-line. Now you're having to come back and get the different rope from the multi-line grapevine and then swap it out with the dangle-do, and that's just a pain in the neck. So those are some quick hacks I've learned over the years to color code your ropes and kind of clean up the loose ends. Another hack I have, I call it a hack, it's just more of a builder trick, is per the ANSI PRCA standard and any kind of fall protection standard for employees, you need to be using not aluminum but a steel carabiner. And a lot of the carabiners out there come anodized, but they also might have wear spots where actually the steel is showing through. One of the things I've done is I prepare for the fall season, which everybody should do it. Wash your ropes, clean up your gear, sweep out the shed, get all the trash out, all the food remnants from your staff's lunch breaks. Because if you don't get that out, it invites all the critters in for the winter, which will want to chew on your harnesses and ropes and make little nested homes. And all they do is ruin expensive gear, and you're buying all new come spring. But one of the things I do with my carabiners is I'll inspect them end of season. I might even take a 100% silicone spray and just kind of give a little bit of little spray right there. You can also use powder graphite will do the trick. Make them open and close, make sure they're good and inspected. But with my carabiners, my steel ones especially, I'll double them up in twos. And I get them all in a bundle. I'll put them in a plastic bag. And then again, I'll take that 100% silicone. It's got to be 100% silicone. And I'll mist them all down in the trash bag. Tie a knot in it, seal it up. That keeps the moisture off of them and they won't anodize and oxidize over winter, and it'll keep the rust off of them. So you do your best to be in a cool, dry location for storage, but the silicone just helps them stay nice and lubricated, shiny. Come out in spring, open the bag, maybe a little bit of slime on them still from the silicone, take a cotton towel, dry them off, boom, you're ready to go for the season. As far as cleaning your equipment, just a damp cotton cloth, just wipe it down is good. You don't really have to soak it or anything, except when it comes to your harnesses and your ropes. Now, I'm going to talk about your ropes, and specifically they've got rope washers that you slide the rope through, hook up your garden hose to it, turn it on high, and it injects water jets in here, and you pull the rope through as it injects water into the rope. That'll wash it out. If you're using your rope correctly, nothing on it shouldn't be water soluble. Your hand, your oils, your food, it's all water soluble. If you don't have one of those water hose adapters that go on your rope, Kind of inappropriate. If you don't have one of those rope washers that go over your rope and inject the water stream into it, you can also take your rope, nice and long as it is, and if you get a nice 80-foot rope, it's going to get kind of long. You can take it like one big long piece of spaghetti and just put it in a bucket of water and kind of agitate it up and down with your hand, and that dirt will dissolve in the water and get kind of brown and ranky looking. Wash it out, dump the water, rinse it out, and just tepid water. Doesn't have to be hot, doesn't have to be ice cold, just tepid so your hand doesn't freeze. Just kind of agitate it, let it soak a little bit, agitate it some more, pour off the water, pull your rope up, and you want to hang it in a cool, dry, shaded location, not in the direct sun. You can actually do what's called a daisy chain. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull the rope through, get a loop, and you can daisy chain the whole rope, and it cuts its length tremendously, and it keeps it from wanting to get tangled. So by daisy chaining your rope, you can still put it in the bucket and agitate it, and then it hangs up over like a tree limb better to dry in the shade. Or you can take a daisy chain rope and put it in a front loader washing machine or a top loading washing machine without the agitator, and it'll wash that way, and the daisy chain will keep it from getting all tangled up in a big spaghetti ball that takes you hours to untie. Now the agitator is important. You don't have an agitator. If you have an agitator, it's going to get that rope sideways and tug and pull, and you're going to be shock loading that rope the whole time it's in the tub going choo-cha, whoosha, whoosha. You're just rucking on your rope. So no agitator. Nice tumble wash, or the agitator on the bottom plate does the swivel dance, okay? You don't want the agitator pulling and tugging on your rope. And don't put it in the dryer. Don't put it in the microwave. Yes, I've heard people say they put their rope in the microwave. Just hang it up over a tree limb or on a bench or on a rail of a deck, cool, shaded, breezy area. It'll dry out in about 4 or 5 hours. If it's still damp, hang it out even longer, but don't put the rope away wet. You gotta let it dry, okay? Let the rope dry thoroughly. And even though it's dry to the touch of the sheath, that core still might have moisture. So I don't know, it might be 7 or 8 hours. It depends on the breeze, the temperature, how wet it was. You know, just feel it and check it out. Now when you wash your ropes, you can just use, like I said, that tepid water. If you're gonna use soap, use soap. A gentle soap, not a detergent. People think that Tide Pods or even Woolite is safe. It's detergent. You want to use a soap. Ivory works good, and a small amount. You get too much on there without a proper rinsing, you get belaying in a rainstorm, you start getting suds and foam at your belay device, and it makes the rope slippery. So I like not to use any soap at all, but if you do use soap, use a very gentle soap, and only about the size of your thumb, the back of your thumbnail, or the size of a quarter. Maybe a silver dollar if you're doing a bucket, a 5 or even a 10-gallon bucket, but that even sounds like a lot of soap to me. So soap, not detergent, and less is better than more. So I hope those little tips help you. As far as the carabiners and silicone spray is nice, and keeping those all kind of tucked up and nice and new looking for next season. Washing your ropes, checking out your color coding on your system. Make sure your grease and any other camming devices are smooth and operating and the springs aren't bad. Anything you flag now you need replaced for next spring, do it this fall. Because the manufacturers oftentimes get taxed on their inventory, and they'll run late season specials to clear their shelves of this year's product at discount prices to avoid paying taxes on what's still in their warehouse. Got to think of those things ahead. Another thing is too, if you're going to do construction of a new course or do maintenance, consider calling your vendor to do it in the fall. Get the budget money for next year in advance. Why? Because come spring, Everybody wants to do their course setup. Everybody has to do their maintenance, and the vendors are just slammed all at the same time. And the tension to get to everybody is immense. And if you do your build in the spring and you're using utility poles, that's when all the foul weather and all the thunderstorms are. And when there's tornadoes, there's down power lines. When there's down power lines, there's a surge in the need and demand on utility poles, and the price goes up. In the fall, there's not so much demand for utility poles. There's plenty on the market. They're easy to get your hands on, and the price tends a little bit on the lower side. Again, little trick to the trade to save money for you and your project. Again, I'm Steve Gustafson with ZipAway. Hope you liked this video. Maybe it was all remedial. Maybe you learned a couple things. But feel free to hit the subscribe button. Click on the bell for notifications. And if you like it, hit the like button for me as well. We'll be posting more of these videos as the season comes. But for now, remember to zip away. Zip.